because I just took a Spanish lesson.
De nada.
I see the rabbis here. Missing a couple more. It's a lively group. I'll mention that, Rick.
Okay, good.
Sometimes we get a little overboard.
Worked up.
Well, we have a lot of opinions.
We do.
Wait a minute. Can I just mention
Well,
something?
it's more than
A
two Jews
group,
together.
a Jewish group
that's
with a
why.
lot of opinions?
A lot of opinions, a lot of
Impossible.
complaining.
It happens.
It happens. That's the true nature of the beast. Hi, Bernie and Marcia.
It's impressive.
Good to see
to
you.
meet you all.
Rabbi.
It's,
Morning.
Marcia,
hi there,
are you okay?
I'm okay. Oh, yes, we
A lot of
talked the other day.
impressive
I think
libraries
I was
behind
just
you.
overtired. I thought I had COVID.
Uh-oh.
I have felt so wiped out.
Glad you didn't.
Yes.
Yeah, I am glad. Me too. Thank you.
Eat a lot of fruits and vegetables.
Okay. Okay, are we doing? No, that's not right. What do we, alphabet, right?
Bet, yes.
Okay, I gotta find
Is
it.
Ray in? Do you see Ray?
Here it is. Okay.
Ray is here.
Oh, Ray is, hi, Ray.
Before we start, I have a question.
Okay.
Yesterday, I attended an Orthodox funeral,
Ooh.
and the rabbi quoted from last week's Parsha. He said, a stranger came to Moses and told him that he was taking on too much by himself. And it puzzled me why he would tell us there's a stranger rather than Jethro.
Huh,
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah.
yes. That's a great question, Bernie. There's different, as you, and this leads into the opening that I was planning. And good morning to everyone. Good morning to Rick. I don't think we've met, so hello, Rick.
Hello.
What we do here is that we are looking at one particular book, which is written by a man named Harvey Fields, who was a rabbi in California. And he took basically commentaries that he was familiar with or that he liked. Some of them are medieval commentaries that are very well known. Others are more eccentric commentaries that were in his library that I've never really heard of or barely heard of. And he just kind of plops them on the page on a specific question and explores that question. And what works so well for our group is that it's on a specific question. So you don't have to be an expert in Maimonides or Nachmanides or any particular thinker or school of thought in order to enjoy it, because the question is, why did Moses, take advice from Jethro,
I don't know, 2 or 3 years.
or whatever the question is. And whether the commentator lived 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago doesn't really matter. I try to give a little bit of historical perspective, but some of you ignore that, and you can. Now, the question here is the last week's portion dealt with Jethro, who is the father-in-law of Moses, and a non-Jew, a Midianite. And so the question is, why would Moses take advice from Jethro? There are various commentators that talk about this. And apparently there's a commentator somewhere, perhaps in the Midrash, that says it wasn't Jethro. It was, the word means just some person. Now, why they would say that, under what circumstances, I would need to investigate that further. But I guess that the commentator maybe does not want to put Jethro in this particular position because it's presenting the non-Jewish father-in-law, even though the Midianites had a religion that was quite close to the Israelites, but it's presenting Jethro in a very senior position where, he's giving Moses really good sage advice. And maybe there's a school of thinking that doesn't really want to encourage that way of thinking, because then it says, well, it's okay to marry a non-Jewish woman because her father may be this great organizational genius and it'll help me run my business better and I'll make more money and I'll become the next IBM.
Really?
And so that's just my initial response to why maybe there was a commentary like that. But I'm sure that the rabbi is drawing on a particular commentary that he did not mention. It is also traditional in rabbinic circles not necessarily to mention your sources. When I started out, I was very careful, in my sermons, especially on the High Holy Days, I'd say, as is written in this book or this scholar or that scholar. And then I realized that the congregants don't care. And, it just makes it a little bit more technical and they have to follow these irrelevant names. So then I cut them out. Now, that doesn't mean that everything I always say is my original thinking, right? So I'm not claiming that everything I say is my original thinking. If you ask me, where did you steal that idea from? I will politely say, I didn't really steal that idea. I'm just using that idea. And, I can usually tell you where I got it from and I will the following week say, I just want to make clear that when Lorraine questioned me about where I got that great idea from, that it came from Elie Wiesel or it came from Rashi or whatever. Miriam, did you want to follow up on Bernie's comment?
I just wanted to say that when we discussed this, I remember I said that Moses was a very intelligent man. And it would seem to me a person in that position, he himself would know that he needed help. In other words, I just feel it wasn't other people telling him. I felt that he himself felt that he
All right, so you
needed
see.
something.
So therefore, there is a natural inclination not to want to give too much credit to the father-in-law. And so for Miriam, Moses is such an important guy that such an important idea had to come from Moses, right? Am I paraphrasing you correctly, Miriam? Yes?
Okay.
And you're not afraid I'll steal your idea for a sermon, Miriam?
Yeah.
Well, if I do, I got like 17 or 18 witnesses that it was stolen from Miriam Herschel. We'll just put that down for the record. Back to you, Bernie. Did you want to follow that up? Why did he mention that in a eulogy?
I have no idea. I mean,
Oh,
it was not relevant to anything that was a character trait of the deceased or anything like that. It was just to me, it just came out of the blue.
uh-huh.
I mean, this guy looked like he was ready studying for his bar mitzvah, so he didn't really have a lot of experience.
Okay, you learn over the years what people want and more to the point what they don't want. And you get shorter. My High Holy Day sermons at the beginning sometimes run 40 minutes. And now I wouldn't dream of that. You just make a point and you give a couple illustrations and then you say goodbye and you hope that people remember something. Another distressing sign of my sermons in my early years in the High Holy Days, I ran into people in the supermarket and I used to always throw in a joke. and they said, "You're the rabbi that told that joke last year." And they remembered the joke. And I said, "What did you remember from the sermon?" And they remembered nothing, just the joke. They didn't get the point of the joke. And that was also a warning sign that, and so at some point I just cut out jokes completely. I just made my point and started, ended, and hoped that they'd remember it. So
You can't win.
can't win. Sai,
That's right.
Sai,
Yeah, what I thought was interesting was that the rules, the regulations, the suggestions, all of those kinds of things are not attributable to God. It's usually some individual who has written it, and God really doesn't place, it's not really in the forefront of any of these suggestions. And that to me is an interesting thing, because somewhere along the line, we begin to lose him in terms of what he thinks is the right thing.
yeah. And how do you keep from losing that thread of thought? Sai,
Say again,
how do you keep that from happening?
well, I think that there should be more of a mentioning of God and what responsibility he has had in keeping things going and keeping these ideas alive and so forth, rather than individuals, if you will.
Mhm. Okay, Marcia, and
Oh,
Marcia, I
it-
hope I did not talk to you yesterday, but you were at
No,
that
I
desk
was fine.
facing the other way, so
I was very busy writing.
I saw.
In response to Sai, I think it was that God set the Israelites on a path. And then man takes over and starts to do his own self-direction of the path that he's going to go on. And I think that's why we see more and more of the people interaction instead of God saying this and God saying that, because you don't really want a dictatorial God. You want what is the word for it? When people make their own decisions.
Self-reliance.
Yeah, that's not the word, but that's a good word. Okay. I know that's in the back of my head.
Self-determination.
So I'm saying that, this
Actualization?
independent thinking of people using God in their background, but you don't have to keep saying God has said this and God says that.
Yes, you are.
Oh, because I got distracted was I heard Ray. Okay. Okay, that's about all that I was gonna say.
Steve Siegel.
Yes, sir. I'd like to get started here with what we're going to talk about today. And so a couple of things to mention. First of all, be respectful of others. And also, if you're not speaking, to please mute yourselves. I know it's an old comment, but we have to do that. Also, please make sure that you're on screen. Don't hide your faces. We want to see you and your expressions and stuff. So please keep your screens on as well. Let us begin with the blessing before Torah study. Baruch atah
Adonai,
Asher
Divrei Torah.
Blessed are
Blessed are you, Adonai,
My God,
ruler of the
ruler
world,
of the universe,
who
who
who has sanctified us with your command,
commandments,
the words of
commanded
Torah.
us to engage in the words of Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, Rabbi, back to you.
I also want to point out that after many weeks of hoping, we've hit 20 people today. Right now, we've got 20 people, all of whom are on screen and all of whom appear to be awake. And one dog, at least one dog, the cram dog. So we'll count we'll count her, 21. And spouses, 22, 23, 24. All right, we won't count spouses. But anyway, congratulations. If your dogs can send in an email summarizing the main points, then we'll count them as full participants next time, even if they don't have their own laptop. We are on page 56. It's Parshat Mishpatim, caring for the stranger. And here we go. So just a week ago, or just this past week, we devoted a good part of our Friday night service to the terrorist situation in Colleyville, Texas, where the rabbi and 3 members of the temple there were held hostage for about 11 hours. And that it did resolve with the captives being freed, thank God, but it could have ended very differently. And this started with the rabbi opening a glass sliding door and letting the guy who became the terrorist just to walk in. He invited him in, even though it was apparent that he wasn't in the right place and that this guy was not coming to services and had no reason to be in that synagogue at that time. And he did it out of compassion. He, gave the guy a cup of tea. Of course, it was much colder in Dallas or in Fort Worth than it is here. So the guy was visibly cold. And so that may have made an issue. And so here our theme for the week is caring for the stranger. So how do you, and undermining that is the whole idea that you have to worry about yourself, especially in this crazy world. So how do you reconcile caring for the stranger? And what does that mean, caring for the stranger? There's all sorts of other questions, of course, about caring the stranger as well. But this is the most, contemporary one. Marcia.
Quickly, our congregation always had the door unlocked for years. I don't remember when it changed, but at some point we realized there were people who were hostile out there, and we put that camera in with the admission button, from the office. So we had for years, had you just walked in the door and you were part of the community. Goodness. So that my phone is ringing at the same time, so go away, phone. And so, it changes because of the what goes on in the world around us. I guess we have to be more careful now.
But it's kind of sad because it's nice to be able to leave your door open and even to have some hot chocolate there. And if somebody is poor and homeless, and you can give them some hot chocolate and make them feel better on a cold, a cold summer's night in Arizona, then.
When I lived in Massachusetts, I never locked the door. The door was never locked. The front door was locked, the side door was open. And when I went to sell the house, I was afraid to use the keys because the lock wouldn't work after all these years. Even that, we nowadays can't leave our homes unlocked. We can't leave anything unlocked because we don't know who's going to come and do bad things.
Right. Miriam?
I saw the ADL Zoom, and Rabbi Charlie said he followed every rule of security. And this man came in, he didn't come in, the doors were locked. And he said to the man, he looked at the man, he looked very normal, everything was fine. He looked him in the eye and he said he was hungry. And the rabbi said he wasn't so sure, he didn't know the man, but he said that he opened the door a little bit and had a conversation with him. And he said he looked perfectly normal. There was nothing, there were no guns, there was nothing. And so he said, well, he's hungry. I'll let him in and have, Rabbi said, some tea and something to eat. And he said he spoke to him before he pulled out the gun. He spoke to him for a long time. He was perfectly normal. And all of a sudden he said, the Jews control the world, and he took out the gun. And that's how it all started. It was an amazing Zoom. I tell you, I was riveted to what he had to say, because he said he had such security with ADL and with anybody else he could. The community was great, and yet he had compassion for the man, and he let him in. So
And-
what do you do?
Yeah, so, I
What
mean,
do you
this,
do?
this comes to what we do Friday night. You know, when somebody comes Friday night who's not a member, they're a guest. So
Yes.
they come in the front door and they're supposed to stop at the welcome guest desk. And Carmen Berkowitz, chair of membership, is sometimes there, or somebody else. And they take their name and their email and give them a little sticker. And, you know, that's it. Now, of course, if they have a knapsack, we would search the knapsack. But if they had a small gun in their pocket or in their jacket, we don't search people. We don't pat them down. And if you're going to pat them down, you've got to know what you're doing. And, it's easy to hide things.
Yes. He said, it's his fault, he said, but it really isn't his fault.
His fault.
Michelle has a question or comment.
Yes.
So, hi everybody. So, what I was thinking about that whole situation, if I may take a moment, I think that goes to say that he knew what he considers his enemies. He knew what the Jewish faith believes in. He knew that we as a community offer help to people, that we don't really turn people away. I believe he knew that, and his intent was to prey upon our compassion and our adherence to God's words. My thing that I had to think about was, I couldn't imagine if he had not let him in, what could have been the outcome. He could have waited out there. He could have shot these people as they left the synagogue.
Right.
It could have been, I know it wasn't an ideal situation, but no matter what you do to keep out somebody like that, they're still going to find a way to do something.
Right. That's
You're right.
And I believe that the rabbi's compassion had something to do with the fact that he did not hurt anybody. I believe inside he maybe he would have felt some sort of guilt or something. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not saying what he did was good or that he is a good person. I just truly believe that he saw people that deserve to be in this world more than himself, maybe at the end. And it's the truth at this point, but that's all I have to say. That's how I feel about it. And thank you, Miriam, for sharing all that, because that's powerful.
Marcia.
But he
There was
did
a
help
church-
them. He did help his congregants get out, though.
There was a church, there's a
Was-
church
so
down
he
in
was a
Texas.
sort of a hero.
All right, there's a church in Texas that invited somebody in to their service, and they gave them food, etc. It was a black church, as I remember. And this guy had a shotgun and he killed a major number of people in that church. And it was a couple of years ago, I think. You just don't know. But how do you say no to somebody who needs your help? It's a tough question.
I have a comment. My takeaway is that there's no foolproof security. We're all at risk, no matter what you do. I think the unfortunate truth is that we're vulnerable. We see that with all these increase in anti-Semitic attacks, and you can even take a very pessimistic view of this. I think when Herzl commented on Vienna, how Jewish, several Jews there were prosperous, and the Jewish community was vital and vibrant. Freud was there and everything. And Herzl commented, this ain't going to last. We need our own homeland to protect us. And some people have said, if you look at history, the countries that welcomed us eventually turned on us. So that's very pessimistic, but I think we have to face that there's anti-Semitism, and we just have to be vigilant. No other way.
And so about, okay, sorry, Miriam.
Could I make a comment on that? They had the FBI agent there at the time, and he said he is doing so much for anti-Semitism. He said, you have no idea. He said they thwarted a huge, he said that he thwarted this group that wanted to attack one of the biggest temples in New York. But they never attacked it. They got him, they got his team, and he was very adamant about the fact that they were really, really trying very hard to do something about anti-Semitism, that it should not exist in this country, and he's going to do anything he can to help. That, I think, is a good comment that he made.
Okay, we're ready to start caring for the strangers. So in the Bible, they weren't necessarily thinking about security and balancing the needs of security in quite the way that we just framed it. The word for stranger in Hebrew is, anyone?
Ger? How do you
Right.
say it? Yeah.
Ger.
Here.
And gerim is plural and gerut is the noun. And then later in Jewish tradition, in the Talmudic period, the word ger stops being a stranger in this sense, and then becomes the word for somebody who converts to Judaism. And so we have a problem in that when the Bible talks about ger, there may not be talking about ger as we understand it later. The Talmud comes many hundreds of years after the Bible. Okay, who'd like to read? Page 56, top of the right-hand column. Is B and then later Miriam.
Okay. Caring for the stranger. Twice in the midst of Parshat Mishpatim, we find a commandment dealing with the care of the ger, or stranger, Exodus, blah, blah. This emphasis upon the treatment of aliens or foreigners, those who are new to the community or society, is not unusual within the Torah. Early Jewish tradition emphasizes the pain of the outsider who seeks solutions to it. Commandments calling for sensitivity and justice for the ger are found in 36 places within the Torah, more than a mention of any other mitzvah.
Wow, okay. Comments on this, that calling for justice and sensitivity for the ger found in 36 places just in the Torah. Now the Torah, we mean just the 5 books of Moses, doesn't count the prophets or writings. Comments, responses to that? Okay, B.
Even the language of the commandments dealing with the ger is special. At times, we are given a positive formulation, such as you shall love the stranger. In other places, a negative formulation, such as you shall not oppress the stranger. Treatment of the stranger is one of those rare rules that is listed not only among the 248 mitzvot aseh, but among the 365 mitzvah lata'aseh. Frequently, the mitzvah also includes the reminder that you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Okay, thank you, B. What is Harvey Fields talking about here? Anybody? Pam, can you help us?
What do you mean, what's he talking about?
Well, he mentions these two categories.
Yeah,
Can you explain what those categories are?
no.
Okay, Bill Cram, the Bernie?
Yeah, there's commandments that you should do and there are commandments that you should not do.
Okay, and how many commandments are there that you should not do?
365,
365.
And how many of them that you should do?
248.
Okay. Ellen, anything to add to that?
I always knew there were 613 rules. So if you add it up, it comes out to that number.
And this number comes from the Talmud. There's a rabbi in the Talmud that just out of the blue says there's 613 commandments. It's not listed in the Bible. But then the rabbis went back to the Bible to find these 613 commandments. And it's also written in the Talmud that 248 positive and 365 negative. And so the rabbis went back to the Bible to look for that number. But there's different lists. And so not everybody has the same list, but that's universally agreed that that's the numbers. Babette.
I'd like to make a comment of something that happened here in Sun City Grand. We have a Shalom Club, and they were usually very welcoming and inclusive until they were not. And it got turned around, perhaps on that basis. So we are here very welcoming now for the stranger, very inclusive, and have all kinds of study groups and different factions that specifically welcome the newcomer here.
Good.
But like the link for this Torah study, we don't put this on the calendar that goes on our website. You have to email, and then Riva and Steve have worked out a system that you can get the link, but we kind of hide the link because we don't want somebody just popping up that might be disruptive. But it's not the open welcoming of one day of yesteryear. Everybody's got to have a certain degree of caution. Ellen, and then Rochelle, and then Cy.
I'm curious about the 365 number, given that that's the days of the year. Have the Kabbalists or anybody else, do they speak about what the
Yes.
significance is?
Yes, these two numbers, the 248 and 365, are both dealt with extensively in various different types of Jewish tradition, among them the Kabbalists. It's, as Ellen points out, it's the number of days in the year, most years. They also said that the negative ones, or the positive ones, 248 is the number of bones in your body, but which may have been what they thought then, but that's not the number of bones in your body that the experts in anatomy say today, but it may have been what they thought were the number of bones in your body, or number of organs and bones, or something like that. But that number doesn't exactly coincide. But there's a lot of speculation because it's considered to be quite important. Now, how you define a mitzvah positive or negative is going to change depending on the person. So for example, just to give you a hypothetical, you can say, don't cut the flowers. Or you could say there's a commandment here, don't cut the roses, and another one, don't cut the daffodils. So do you count that as 1 or 2? So you can, depending on who's making the list, you can increase or decrease the number to fit the predetermined maximums that you've got. So you could say, be nice is 1 commandment. Or you could say, be nice to this group and be nice to this group, or be nice in this way, be nice in another way, and each one is a separate commandment. Clearly, it's easier not to do the do not do's, right? Because as long as you don't murder anyone today, you've got credit for doing a mitzvah. But when the positive ones, you've got to actually, get out of your house and do something that is harder. Okay, Rochelle, Cy, and Pam.
What in response to Ellen, as far as the mitzvahs, every day I read daily mitzvahs, and we've had the same mitzvah for the past 4 days. Just the way it goes when it coincides with this or that, and that's on a Chabad website. But I think there's like only 130 some mitzvahs that apply today because most of them are involved with the temple. I believe that's how that goes. But what I wanted to say as a convert, when I first came to Temple Beth Shalom, it was, my husband was very funny. He said, "You look like Hitler's daughter, for crying out loud. You're going to walk in there and they're not going to want you there. You don't look the part. I don't think you can play the part." And I said, "What are you talking about? This isn't an acting job." But I really felt very welcome, and I obviously came with very good intentions. And I thank you all for welcoming me and everything. But there was also some caution. I did note that there, were procedures. They didn't want me past a certain point, it seemed. I buzzed to get in and the whole 9 yards. I think the congregation's doing a good job. And as far as that, but as far as for a convert, I didn't feel it was hard. But I did note caution, and I think that that's appropriate and expected.
And I guess our concern would magnify for younger men, because rightly or wrongly, we're more worried that a younger man is more likely to be a terrorist. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But
well, and that's the thing, you really don't know anymore, because there's children. I know a lot of soldiers. I know a soldier that had 7 friends die right in front of his face because they went to help a kid and he had a bomb and he pulled the bomb and it killed 7 soldiers at once. You just don't know who to trust. It's almost like you need some sort of a soothsayer or something in there, with some weird connection to God or something, telling you, no, don't let this person in, or let, it's not really feasible. It's just happens.
and that's, I guess, why, and that, I don't want to dwell on the security thing too much, but that's why we have a guard for the Friday night service. And that, I guess, is why I'm more cautious when we don't have a guard, when there's some sort of small meeting or something, that the guard provides us with a little bit of discernment and support. And so, okay, thanks, Rochelle. Who is next? Cy, and then Pam. Cy, Pam, and Lorraine.
Apparently, there's a great deal written about the caring and the acceptance of the stranger. Now, it's my understanding that a great deal of this was written during the desert time, and I'm wondering where the stranger was. Who were the strangers? Where did they come from? This was a group of people, 400 to 700,000 people in the middle of the desert, where they were probably a huge group, but the loneliest group there. There weren't any other people, as I understand it, that were willing to come and become Israelites, if you will.
I'm gonna suggest that this text was written in Israel and really was not referring to the Exodus period at all. It's talking about the Israelites in Israel, that they had a lot of internal migration, like today. So people from other tribes, the Canaanites, the Philistines, the Jebusites, the Midianites, want in for whatever reason. And so the Israelites had 5% or 10% of the population were non-Israelites. And what do you do with them? Maybe some of them came in for jobs. Maybe some of them were escaping whatever bad situations back home. Not unlike the Israelites who, at least according to our mythology, we fled slavery. So we went somewhere because, God promised us this holy land, but we also had to get away. So what do you do with these other people that have come for whatever reason they've come, presuming that they're not criminals and they're not spies and they're not coming with any malice or ill intent? They're just people that either for positive or mostly probably negative reasons had to leave where they were. And the Torah is very clear. You want to the extent possible, be friendly and be helpful. But it doesn't say be naive, right? It doesn't say be naive. If you're in Ukraine now and a Russian comes over and says, "Oh, I just thought I would get a job here," you might say, can we learn a little bit more about you? Were you ever in the Russian military, for example? Are you, part of the Secret Service there? Just asking. Okay, who's next is Pam. Pam, and then if Lorraine wants to say something, she can. And if she doesn't, she doesn't have to.
My question is, I think, similar to Sai's, where it says you shall not oppress the stranger. Does it mention any specific type of strangers that we don't oppress?
Not really. I mean, most of the references are like you see. I mean, I looked up one in the Torah just at the beginning of the session, and it just says, you should be nice to the strangers. So it doesn't, the Torah itself doesn't, at least in these parts. And remember, in this part, in Parshat Mishpatim, which is our portion, which is in the middle of Exodus, it's mentioned twice, which was a lot until we learned that it's actually in the Torah mentioned a total of 36 times. But each time is pretty repetitive. There's not anywhere where it says the strangers are a group that came in 12 years ago and they all speak this language and they're all expert blacksmiths, or they're all expert shoemakers, or it doesn't say anything like that. Pam, did you want to follow that up?
No, thank you.
Lorraine?
Yeah. I don't think you can tell a person's intent by looking at them. Some people have the sweetest demeanor and kind, and they're evil. I believe people are people, and I still don't want to be so soured that I'm judging everybody when I face them. We had a rabbi in New Jersey many, many years ago, a person that Bernie and I didn't like particularly much. However, I'll speak for myself, Bernie. I see you laughing. He said, if a beggar approaches you, give him something. Don't make the judgment call that it's for drugs or it's for whatever, something that's not a desirable purchase. Until this day, when we see that man standing in front of the supermarket exit with the sign that says, veteran, no food, 6 kids at home, or something to that nature, I always say to Bert or to myself, we got to give him something. That message is still in my head. Secondly, when Rochelle said her brother or husband said she looked like the daughter or wife of Hitler, I've been not told that personally, but my whole life, people have said, you're really Jewish? It's the coloring, it's whatever. And I said, why? Are you looking for my tail? I mean, I don't know how to answer it. So now I say yes, and I'm proud of it. I don't know what to do. It depends. My grandson, who some of you met, I brought him to Torah class once. He looks totally non-Jewish, and it happens that his mother is non-Jewish, but he's raised as a Jewish child. And some kid came up to him at the locker room at high school and said, my mother said, you're a Nazi. Whoa. Max and Jared and Kyle, all my grandsons, never get violent. He got so upset by that comment that tears were coming down his eyes. We judge people so quickly, and it's not right. I still want to be accepting of the stranger and hope to God he's not going to shoot me for it.
And I guess here the critical question is, how do you care for a stranger in a positive way without contributing to societal problems like alcoholism? Bill and then Steve.
Just an aside, what does it mean to look Jewish? Does Sammy Davis Jr. look Jewish? But that's besides the point. I noticed in the Parsha, it says, don't impress the widow, don't impress the orphan, don't impress the stranger. To me, that kind of seems to connect with the experience of slavery that the Jews had. They've escaped from slavery. And we know slavery is still very, very prevalent there from the other commandments. And I think some of that meaning, do not oppress them, might be do not exploit them, do not make them slaves. These are people, powerless people. It'd be very easy to enslave them. And I think some of that may be behind this commandment, do not oppress them.
Right, good point, I think, and good point. Yes, Steve.
Weren't there caravans and nomads going through the desert as well as when the Israelites were fleeing Egypt?
I guess so, small numbers. Yes.
So those would be strangers as well.
Yes.
They could be welcomed as well as any other stranger.
Yes. Yes. I just have the feeling that this was written later and that its context was in Israel, but Steve is totally right. It could apply in the desert. There's no reason it wouldn't. Steve, response? Okay. Okay. Ellen is going to leave soon. She's going to miss the chocolate cake at the end of today's session. Riva, can you connect with her to arrange for her to get the end of the recording, except no chocolate cake? Marcia, did you have your hand up?
I was just agreeing with Steve. I think, well, you're looking at it as a different time frame, but when I read this in Exodus, I think about people crossing the desert, commerce trails and things like routes and things like that, that would be passing through. And then at some point we have those angels who come to Abraham and make this such an issue of this welcoming of the stranger at that point.
Right. Now the story of the angels in the Torah, there's not a word about them being angels. It says they were just strangers. It's the rabbinic interpretation that says they're strangers. This is completely contrary to the reading of the story, because Abraham offers them food, non-kosher food, by the way. But if Abraham even suspected they were angels, he wouldn't have offered them food, because everyone knows angels don't eat lunch.
But he thought they were strangers, right?
He thought they were just, kind of like the guy in Texas, just these poor people wandering through that needed food and drink, and that, yeah. But for some reason that we won't explore now, the rabbis really wanted to turn that into angels. Okay, back to you, B. We are now, we're at toward the bottom almost on 56 in the right-hand column. Many commentators.
Many commentators note this unique emphasis of the Torah upon justice for the stranger and ask, why all these warnings? Why all this attention to ger? Early rabbinic interpreters offer a variety of opinions. Many understand that the word ger does not mean only stranger. They point out that it also translates to convert. For instance, we are told that God so loves gerim, or convert, that God postpones Abraham's circumcision until he was 90, so future converts would know one can become a Jew at any age. Another sage suggests that Jews are commanded to love converts because the Torah uses similar descriptions for both Jews and gerim. Both are called servants, ministers of the altar, friends of God. Even the notion of a covenant with God is mentioned in connection with both. Do you want me to read the box?
Sure.
Concern for the convert. Should a convert come to study Torah, one may not say to him or her, how can one who has eaten forbidden foods have presumption to study God's Torah? Those who bring others near to Judaism by warmly welcoming them as converts are considered by God as if they had given birth to them.
Oh, wow. Ellen.
That's interesting. The treatment of converts.
Wait, stop there, B. Ellen.
I have a question, and it's very contemporary based, like how the government or the rulers, the people who lead Israel can call themselves observant and then treat people, strangers, as they do. It's just it just kind of blows my mind to read this and then think about what's happened in Israel over the last 40 years or so.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I've had people I converted, move to Israel, and the struggles that they've had to be recognized have been unbelievable. That the Ministry of the Interior, which was until recently under the control of one of the ultra-Orthodox parties, I'm not sure if that is the case under the new government, it may not be. They just were so unpleasant. In the end, they were able to get it, but I had to write all these, appeals, and I had to, it was and this was to be recognized by the civil authorities. So it was really very much a horrible situation. And, there was hope that the new government would correct things, but the new government, which is a little bit more liberal, has all sorts of elements, and they're trying not to break up their government by doing anything controversial. So they've been very cautious, which I understand, but, I'd like them to address those things. So yeah, it's really too bad. Minya?
I have two things I want to say. First, I think the first part of this box is outrageous. In a description of how could a convert study the Torah, blah, blah, blah. To me, someone who's a convert came to this religion because they wanted to. They weren't born into it like the rest of us may have been, but they chose to become a part of Judaism. So this comment to me shouldn't even be there. Secondly, I have a personal connection to this stranger story. My children are adopted. When my son had a bris, the rabbi gave us a card saying that he is a member of the Jewish tribe now.
Like a certificate.
Right. When it came time for his bar mitzvah, we gave the rabbi wanted to see the card to make sure that, you know, he had a bris. And he says to us, do you know that the word stranger is at the top of this card? And we said, no. Apparently, my then brother-in-law told the rabbi who performed the bris that he was a stranger, and it stayed on the card the entire time until the bar mitzvah when we first found out about it. The rabbi at that time wrote us a new card and took the word off. But my concern when my husband and I found out about it, we were livid. Why would someone put that on a card just because the child was adopted?
Well, the Hebrew word for stranger is ger, so you would put on a conversion certificate ger at the top, which would be you could translate as stranger. So that, you know, our current term for conversion in our temple is gerut program, which means conversion program, but it could be translated as stranger program, I guess, you know, based on the other translation.
But one of the things that the rabbi, when he was 13, told us was the reason the word is there is that in case he ever wanted to marry an Orthodox girl, they had to know that he was a convert, basically.
Let me think here. So in Orthodox rules, a Kohen, I'm a Kohen, cannot marry a divorcee or a convert. Or maybe, yeah, a divorcee or a convert. So, but how would that? But
I just don't understand why, if someone is coming into the religion, practices it, lives by the traditions and whatever else they're supposed to be doing, why that label should stay there for their entire lives.
yeah, so I guess, you know, now we go back and forth on this because once somebody converts, they're supposed to be treated like everyone else. You're not supposed to mention it. But in today's world, converting to Judaism is not a bad thing. So if I don't know, if we're at a Torah study or something and somebody converted, I don't necessarily avoid mentioning it because it's interesting. It's not seen in a positive or negative way necessarily. It's just interesting. So there's no real reason to, you know, to emphasize it, but there's also probably no real reason to, you know, to minimize it. But in the time that you're talking about, this is decades ago, things
Right.
may have been different, and if they were in the Orthodox community. But what word did he put at the top?
Well, we don't have the thing now. It's in our safe deposit box, but the rabbi told us it said stranger.
Which is ger.
Right.
Well, and what does the new certificate say?
He took the word off entirely.
Oh, and he just said, these are your kids.
Right.
Oh, and so that's no longer a conversion certificate. It's just a certificate of a circumcision. Oh, now I get it. Okay.
Right.
The first rabbi was saying that the circumcision was part of a conversion of the infant. The second certificate just says it's a circumcision of a Jewish child.
Right. And the first one, if it wasn't for my former crazy brother-in-law who thought he was God's gift to the world as far as the Torah and Jewish custom goes, the rabbi would never have even put that on there. It was because of what this man said.
That he emphasized, yes, I've had people who butted their noses into areas they shouldn't have done that, made things much more complicated. I see Miriam and Sai and Rick, if you want to say something afterwards, you can. Miriam.
That bothered me when I read the Parsha. It, in actuality, is a convert a stranger because they want to belong. He's not a stranger. And I didn't think that should be there.
Well, what I explained a few minutes ago is that the original intent in the Torah is not talking about converts at all. It's talking literally about strangers who are, let's say, Hittites.
Yes.
And ancient Israel was a certain area around Jerusalem and Hebron and so forth. And a Hittite wanders into this area and gets a job and starts living there. So that becomes what in Hebrew was called a ger. He didn't convert necessarily to Judaism. He's what we'd call a migrant. Later, maybe 600, 800 years later in the Talmud, the word ger, which had formerly meant migrant stranger, now means convert. It takes on a completely different meaning. But it's the same Hebrew word. So it's confusing. The rabbis should have take a different word, right? That would have made it clear, but they didn't. Right. So we're stuck with one Hebrew word meaning two or three very different things. Okay, Sai, and then if Rick, and then Ray.
You know, approaching it from an entirely different point of view, I'm thinking that the idea of being good, kind, and accepting strangers was because this was a small tribe, and they needed as many people as they could to be a little bit stronger, a little more powerful in the desert. So they would be able to be more of a force, and so they made it possible for anybody who wanted to come and join and become, at that time, an Israelite and be part of that tribe. And I think it was politics more than religion that made them do what they did.
Yeah. Well, politics and economics are both very important. Both very important. Okay. Rick?
Well, I would just want to say, when I was reading this, I think it's more of an attitude towards strangers that we need to have kind of a welcoming. My daughter was also adopted, blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful girl. And we were very fortunate. She was very accepted into the Jewish community, and she had a beautiful bat mitzvah. So we had a very good experience in terms of conversion. I guess you would call, I don't know if you would even call it conversion. Yeah, I guess you would, wouldn't you?
I guess there's two ways to look at it, you know, and who is next? Yes, Ray.
Ray, you'll have to unmute.
Yes. I cannot understand this at all. Naomi, the son, married a Midianite. And that woman lay down in front of, I can't remember the gentleman's bed there out in the open, laid down at his feet, became his wife, and became the grandmother of David, who became a king. To me, that is a an invitation to people who want, prefer to stay or enter into the covenant of Judaism. I cannot understand this expression of waiting over it. I feel that we here in this particular community have welcomed many people into our covenant, and they have all been wonderful Jews. In fact, I think they are more often than not better Jews than those of us who come from the Abrahamic line. So I do not like this interpretation at all.
Yes, so there's definitely two views in the Talmudic literature on this. There's the very welcoming and biblical literature as well. There's a very welcoming line that converts are wonderful, and there's a more hostile line. So two very, very different views that basically coexisted for many, many hundreds of years, and to this day as well. Other comments? Yes, Riva.
Yeah, I noticed on the chat, which some of you may not have seen, that a number of people have said they prefer the term Jew by choice to convert.
Okay, B, back to you.
The treatment of converts is a sensitive matter. Entering a new group, whether religious or secular, is always frightening. One is not sure of what to expect and therefore is uncertain and uncomfortable. The welcome given by a family or group to a newcomer can make a difference between feeling accepted or rejected. Perhaps that is why Jewish tradition emphasizes reaching out with friendship to the ger, to make certain that he or she is at home within the Jewish community. For many rabbinic interpreters, all this concern for feelings of the ger meant that Jews had special obligations to treat converts fairly, never to take advantage of them, insult them about their past, or find fault with them. Converts, the rabbis declared, are beloved by God. Later commentators not only note that Jews must welcome and appreciate converts, but also treat ger justly. They point out that the Torah cautions us not to oppress the ger because you know the feelings of a stranger, having yourself been strangers in the land of Egypt. This warning, say these teachers, raises significant questions. Do the memories of the past, especially painful past, teach us to be more sensitive to the feeling of others? Can those who recall being abused or oppressed prevent themselves from abusing or oppress others? In answer to these questions, there is a serious division of opinions among interpreters. For example, Rashi's view is that for many people, memories of cruel treatment do not teach sensitivity. And what the Torah really meant by its warning was that if you oppress the ger, he or she might answer by reminding you of your own lowly origins. You might be told, don't try to elevate yourself by demeaning me. After all, you also come from strangers. Your people were Gerim in Egypt.
Okay, stop. Comments on this? I mean, it is very interesting that Jewish tradition stresses that we were slaves in Egypt, that it's over and over. You know, Jewish tradition could say we were kings in Israel. You know, Solomon had all this jewelry, but it doesn't. It talks about the low point, not the high point. Why? And what does this mean? And, you know, any responses to that? Okay, Pam.
Well, I like the fact that it does mention the low point and that we should never forget that. You know, It's kind of like where we started. You know, and that we should always just be cognizant of, you know, of the stranger and the convert. I mean, back in our hometown, back in Connecticut, I had a member of my congregation who every time she saw me, she somehow slipped into the conversation. I was a convert. You know, it's just, she felt the need to, I think finally Dave said something to her to knock it off. But you know, we should just, you know, it's kind of like our base reminder. Okay, we came out of Egypt. We should just remember that and treat people accordingly from there.
Rochelle?
I love what Pam said, and in addition to that as well, I think it's also important to remember how we came to Egypt. They were invited.
Right.
They were given the best of the lands. They were given homes within the royal community. They were, so it's kind of, I guess, kind of a catch-22, so to speak, that it was a good, you know, I don't know how I'm trying to say it. I think I'm going to say it wrong, but you get my point.
Right. That how did we end up as slaves? We were invited in and we were originally treated very nicely. So the lesson you could say the lesson is that it's not only you have to treat people nicely at the beginning, but you have to make sure to continue that fair treatment, equitable treatment later. You can't just be nice to people for the first week. And I'm particularly sensitive to people that are nice to you when they want something, and then as soon as they get it, they're not nice, you know, or they're nice to people that they think can help them, but they're not nice to people that can't. You know, you should be nice. I mean, I'm nicer to people that are nice to me, but that's different, you know, so I'm okay with that. You know, I don't think I should be super nice to people that are mean to me, but I don't just, you know, I'm not just friendly to the big shots. Rochelle, back to you, comment? No, okay. Anyone else? Babette, Shirley, Dee, Rick, Lorraine, Bill.
I see a little bit here of avoid hubris. Am I pronouncing that right? You know, don't get too cocky. Remember where you came from. You can
Hubris.
Yeah, you can get a swell head, and you better be humble and remember your origins.
Right. And humility has maybe the word in English has a bad rap, so it implies a certain excessive, you know, where you're like, you have to go around saying, I'm nothing, I'm nothing, I'm nothing. But the way that I interpret the word humility is just like Bill described it, you know, just avoiding hubris, not being arrogant, being reasonable. And that doesn't mean you can't be proud of your accomplishments, but just don't make it swell your head and act aloof and obnoxious. You know, nobody likes somebody who's aloof and obnoxious. Miriam.
As far as I know, we don't proselytize as a lot of other religions do. But as Rochelle said, we invite people. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one difference with the Southern Baptists that I'm trying to change is that we don't say that you're going to go to hell if you don't practice Reform Judaism. But I've learned that it would be more effective if I started saying that. So I'm starting this Friday night, that's going to be our new mantra. I'm just joking. But yeah, if you believe, if you're a Southern Baptist and you believe that the only way to go to heaven and avoid eternal damnation and burn in hell forever is to convert to a specific form of their religion, then that gives you a just theological justification to proselytize. You're not proselytizing because you think you've got a good religion and it's got an interesting philosophy and it's got all these wonderful thinkers. None of that is relevant. You're proselytizing because it's the only way to save people from burning in hell forever. So therefore, when you knock on somebody's door, then that's what you're trying to do. Judaism doesn't believe that. Therefore, we don't have that justification for that sort of proselytization. Rochelle, and then anyone else, Dee or Shirley or Lorraine or Riva or Marcia or whoever else. Rochelle.
Okay, what she just said, it was kind of weird, but my family is all back in West Virginia and Western Maryland area, where everything is very Southern. And at 2 funerals, my stepfather's and my father's, the people who spoke, the religious people who did whatever, they both got up there and said, if you are not, a believer in Christ, you are going to go to hell. And they pointed at me, not at 1 funeral, but at 2.
Oh, God.
I'm not making that up. I had to walk out of my stepfather's funeral. I was so angry. I couldn't believe that was just said. And at my father's funeral, he went 1 step further as to say he was going to read passages that my father loved, but then began reading these things like the Jews were invading or the hatred of the Jews. It was one of the most horrible times I could ever imagine. I sat there in front of my family and this man just kept pointing out how he hated the Jews and how anybody who follows Judaism or anything that wasn't Christ-like was going to hell. These things are very real and they're very strong in those religions.
So this
I'm glad
is
that it's not that way here.
So Miriam is therefore correct, or Ray and Miriam are correct, that we don't have anything like that. So we encourage, but we don't proselytize in that sense. Marcia.
Well,
Marcia and then Ray.
There we go back to anti-Semitism. If you don't believe what they believe, you're a bad person and a bad religion. And so the division in this country now with, if you're not an evangelical Southern Baptist, whatever, holier than thou person, you're not worth anything and you shouldn't have any kind of say in the government or anything like that. So this is where this is the start of all this anti-Semitism, is to say, if you're not me, then you're no good. If you don't believe what I believe. And when you say, welcome the stranger and be kind to them, it doesn't say in there, make the stranger become like you. It doesn't say you must convert. It just says be kind to that person. And there's a difference in that.
Pam.
Well, I always believe that we're the chosen people, not because we're better than other people. It's just we give ourselves high standards on how we should live.
Right. And that's a very important distinction.
Right.
Ray, and then maybe Babette or Minya.
Most of you know that I was born in 1920. My parents, thank goodness, arrived in America in the 1920s. And nobody stopped them. But the little girls in my mostly Catholic neighborhood.
Hi.
Hi, Steve.
We have no internet. Our internet connection is just totally gone.
Okay.
All right.
So, and it just, automatically happened.
Okay.
So I have no way of reconnecting until it comes back on. Our wonderful Cox connector. Anyway,
Steve,
sorry
you're
about that.
gonna
Nothing we can-
you're gonna miss the chocolate cake.
I know. Well, I think I would rather have cheesecake.
Okay, well.
Cheesecake with strawberry or cherry topping.
Okay. Do you want me to leave you on the, you want me to leave you on the phone or
No, there's nothing we really can do until the internet comes back on.
okay, I'll say goodbye and we're in the middle of a comment by Ray. So my apologies to
Steve.
Ray. And back to you, Ray.
Bye-bye, Steve, and happy birthday. My point is that the little girls would tell me that my father killed Christ. I remember going home heartbroken because I knew my father wouldn't kill a fly. I never got really terribly friendly with them. And I thank goodness that they didn't have a way to test us with a genetic testing, and in order to keep others who have Jewish blood in them through the centuries. We're lucky to be Jews, and everybody should do as they wish. And it's strange that much of Christianity is following the precepts that were laid down by Jews.
Thank you, Ray. Riva.
Yeah, there's an interesting shift here on page 57 on the right-hand side where we shift from talking about a convert or a Jew by choice focus as using the word ger to a much more universal use of the word ger being any kind of stranger. And I think the remaining material in this reading really focuses much more on relationship with all kinds of strangers. And there are a couple of really wonderful passages at the tail end. And I wonder if we can skip to perhaps cover some of that.
Okay, sure. What passage were you thinking of?
Two in particular, it's the right-hand side of page 59.
Okay, what part?
It says, it starts with, for Hirsch, however, the treatment of the stranger is also a special test of living ethically as a Jew. Because of their history of persecution, Jews should be more sensitive to the suffering of foreigners or strangers. And then dropping down further in the next paragraph towards the end, he says, according to Beck, argues that no people is superior to any other. No person is more sacred than any other. We are all strangers and must care for one another. And that's out of the Essence of Judaism, Shaken books. And I thought those are beautiful pieces that shouldn't be neglected in this. Although it's important to talk about Jews by choice, I think there's this other element that's also very important to Judaism. And they're separate to some degree. I mean, they overlap, but they're also separate.
So the first point that Samson Raphael Hirsch is making is that you have to recognize every human being as a human being and not be prejudiced based on any pre-existing factors. So you look at Joe or Steve or Adam or whatever, or Jill or whatever, and you look at them, as that person, and you try to, appreciate their positive character traits. And the second point, which is Leo Back, it's interesting. One is an Orthodox German rabbi and one is a Reformed German rabbi. Leo Back is saying, that every person is sacred, and this comes back to the Torah.
I
know,
love
from
the
the-
line, no people is superior to any other. Nope.
And,
No,
and this is Leo Back, who was the chief rabbi of Berlin right before World War II. And,
wow.
and stayed in Germany during the Holocaust, survived the Holocaust in Theresienstadt, and then was the most important European Reform rabbi in the period immediately afterwards. I think Pam just posted something about Dave that I missed. Pam, what happened or is happening?
Oh, I just wanted to say he did have a successful heart procedure, and he just wanted to thank everybody in the congregation for the thoughts and prayers that he got.
Oh, that's the one yesterday.
No, just now.
Just
Yeah.
now?
No, I just posted it now.
Oh, but it was the one yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. And that was
Monday, actually.
Oh.
Yep.
Yes.
Time flies when you're not.
It's
All right, well, so Riva is framing our conclusion here. So do we all agree on this, that both Hirsch and Bach, Reform and Orthodox German rabbis, are both right, that one of the important messages of Judaism is to look at the humanity of each person, not to be prejudiced, not to say, well, they have dirty clothes, therefore they must be scum. And to try to appreciate the positive character traits that other people have, and not to be arrogant, but humble, not in the sense of humble like I'm terrible and everybody's better than me, but humble in the sense of, I'm not arrogant, I'm not going to be obnoxious. And welcome back to Steve.
Thank you.
This is Judaism believes in miracles, and some forms of Judaism, such as Kabbalah, parts of Kabbalah believe in reincarnation. And so we have an example of both here, both miracle and reincarnation right before our eyes. Welcome, Steve. Sai.
I think we have a problem here in terms of what is the attitude and how do we accept people who want to immigrate to this country and people who are chased out of one country and have to move to another country. They are strangers, and yet we turn them back legally.
And that's why immigration, which we're not getting into politics, but immigration is so sensitive, because not only does it have tremendous economic implications, but it also affects religious values. It's a key component, but of course, what does it mean and how should it operate are very controversial points that we're not going to get into here. Babette.
Okay, well, 2 points. First, is it anywhere in Christian liturgy that it's love thy neighbor as thyself, or is that just from?
No, I mean, all of the Hebrew Bible is part of Christianity as well.
So they didn't get the lesson, right? And although as far as immigration is concerned, well, when you're running from communism, you're welcome, but when you're running from anti-Semitism, you're not welcome in this country.
I guess that depends on the period.
Well,
If you show up at the right time,
historically,
you might be welcome, but yes, it's historically that is true. Miriam, and then I think we're almost ready to close down.
okay. You never know when someone will convert. When I was in Panama, one of my children's friends would spend a lot of time in our home, and we had Hanukkah together, et cetera, to make it about a year ago, my son called me and he said, "Did you know that Russ converted?" I said, "Converted?" She said, "Yes, he converted to Judaism quite a while back. They contacted, and he is a Jew. And every Friday night, every single Friday night, I get a little caption with Shalom, Shabbat Shalom." And to me, that was a very interesting story.
Okay.
And that's how you become a Jew with converts, by watching and listening and reading.
Thank you for all of your comments this week. It was very interesting. Next week, we're moving to the subject of the ark in the temple and the menorah. So it's a good time to prepare comments, and you can always prepare, not only questions, but answers. You can do a little Googling because in our synagogue, we have an ark, we have a Torah, we have eternal light, we have menorahs of different sorts, 6 and 8 candles, 2 different kinds of menorahs. How does this come from the temple? What is the biblical precedent for all that? We'll talk about that next week, very different than this week. Okay, we're going to do the final blessing. Steve is back to lead us. And then I want to wish everyone a happy week, and very glad that Dave came through his heart procedure so well. And we look forward to seeing him on long bike rides very soon. Okay, we join together in the blessing after the Torah. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, again, welcome, Rick. I'm glad you were joining us, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, I did.
Let us conclude with the final blessing. Baruch atah
Adonai,
Eloheinu
melech haolam,
asher
Amen.
Chayei
Olam Nata B'Tocheinu.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu haolam.
Torah.
Blessed is
Blessed is Adonai our God,
ruler of the
ruler of the
universe,
universe,
who has given us the seed of truth, planting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. Oh, Reva, you have a comment?
Quick reminder, you'll find this in the bulletin. You'll find it in the show for this next week. We've got a class coming up that's starting on February 10th. It's thinking about God. How does evil exist in this world? That question has certainly come up a lot in this class. If you're interested in a 3-week course on Zoom, presented by our beloved Rabbi, please sign up. And we have quite a few people from this class who've already signed up.
Good.
The registration is going well. Please join the group before we run out of space.
Thank you, Reva.
Thanks, Reva.
Stay well, everybody.
Good week, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Menya.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Happy birthday, happy birthday.
Thank you. Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.